certificate, that mastery, and also something bigger with pedagogy and things that a college or university should be specializing in, right? About how to actually teach and convey this information so people actually learn it. That's I think, the first thing. The second piece of it is colleges and universities, historically anyway, aren't just interested in the transmitting of technical skills, but also how you put that in a deeper context, what's often called the soft skills of learning, the critical thinking, communication, working with others through collaboration, things like that. And so I think colleges and universities, not just saying that, but really creating authentic places where people can collaborate and learn together through these different technical paradigms, I think is a place where they can really add a lot of value to the stuff that we don't know how to measure well, but we know is really important for human flourishing. In higher education, outside of colleges and universities, I think we're at this moment where we're starting to see new forms of learning pop up. A lot of these are going to be work-based experiences. So apprenticeships are becoming a much bigger point of emphasis, and people and employers thinking, how can we leverage these to educate the future workforce without a degree perhaps, but make sure we get really good individuals coming into these jobs to power our future success. A lot of people are looking at work-based degrees. We have an alum of the school, Mallory Dwinnell, who is building work-based degree programs. So you get the best of the degree, but you get really practical experience on the ground, and far more affordable because it doesn't cost a lot of money to educate people, and they can be earning money in a job while they are learning as a core part of the experience. So I think we're going to see a lot of these alternatives to traditional college make much bigger headway in the years ahead. What we really have right now in the economy, I think, is a signaling problem, that traditional degrees have never been a perfect proxy for this person's ready for this particular job, but they're breaking down faster. And what's more, when we need technically skilled people in jobs, and frankly, even more technically skilled, because a lot of entry-level roles are disappearing right now, people are going to need more technical skills, but they don't necessarily have degrees to get those. And so these alternatives to the traditional college experience that are much more ensconced in work itself, embedded with the skills and experiences people need to really succeed, I think is going to be the future. And AI is going to sort of accelerate that in two ways. One, because the changing nature of work is going to accelerate, having people on the ground with you, actually working on the problems, getting real experiences, understanding what the job entails, and building the appropriate skills. I think that's going to be more important, not less, in the future. And I think we're going to be able to use AI to more rapidly spin up educational programs alongside those work-based experiences to help make sure people don't have gaps in their learning or have the right technical foundation to be able to be great at those jobs. I think the narrative around everyone needs a degree is already starting to shift. I think it's being driven by a few things. Number one, many families across the country are looking at colleges and universities and becoming much more discerning customers. They're saying roughly 38% don't complete a 4-year program within 6 years. They take on a lot of debt, and there's no return on the other side if you get a lot of debt but no degree. A lot of them are looking and saying half of those who do graduate go into jobs that don't require the degree. And what the research is telling us is if you start in a job that doesn't require a degree, 5 years later, odds are very high that you're going to still be in a job that does not require a degree. At the same time, companies are starting to question, do I need to require degrees for all these roles? What's the real value of that? And so they're dropping degree requirements, although they are still using degrees often to hire in practice. So we'll see how that shakes out in the years ahead. But here's the other piece of it that I think is really interesting. Gen Z coming up right now through the end of high school and graduating, more and more of them are going to vocational programs instead of college. More and more of them are saying, I'm going to take a gap year and figure out, is college really right for me? More and more of them are seeing the shortages, not just in the skilled trades, but also in tech fields and the like, and saying, maybe there's a different path into those. And so you couple that with an environment where only a third of the public believes in the promise of higher ed right now. And it's not just among Republicans that the confidence is collapsing. I think Democrats are about 50% believe in college at the moment. And what I think you're seeing, though, is a shift in how both parties are actually thinking and talking about post-secondary education, so anything after high school. Which is to say, when President Obama was in office, this notion of everyone needs some college, everyone needs some sort of degree, was very ascendant in the Democratic Party in particular. And now I think you see a shift where both Vice President Harris and now President-elect Trump were talking about these college alternatives. And there's real bipartisan agreement that having a system of apprenticeships that's not just for, say, HVAC and plumbing, but also IT and Salesforce jobs and Facebook marketing and things of that nature and healthcare and on, could be a real part of our education and workforce systems in this country. In many ways, while we see a big departure right now among the population, I actually think in an interesting way among policymakers, we see some convergence to saying, we ought to look at these alternatives and think about how they promise pathways for all Americans, regardless of what really lights their fire. Obviously, COVID and the pandemic were brutal on a lot of families and K-12 school systems. But I do think that there was an interesting silver lining in creating more room for innovation. Because while a lot of school systems, I think they were prisoner to their one-size-fits-all mentality about how we educate and serve students and families from very different walks of life and very different learning needs at different times. What it did was empower parents to say, my neighborhood public school isn't the only way to get an education. And so I think what we've seen is that education is getting a lot less linear. And my own take is that disruption happens when there's either non-consumption or people are overserved by the existing system. You might say, come on, Michael, how are people possibly overserved by our K-12 schools? All we read about is how they're chronically underperforming or achieving. But I think for a lot of families, they're like, I don't really care about the football team, or I don't care about this set of services, or I don't need that. And so this micro school community that's extremely personalized, really rebuilding community in the way I think our public schools originally did, and that are publicly funded in some states, now up to 12, universally so. I think for many families and students, that's creating a really interesting innovation pathway to drive disruptive innovation and drive personalization in some really interesting ways. And I think the question will be this: do we move to this fully alternative system, or even better, do our public school districts start to say, we could do that too. We can create alternative pathways in our own districts and create micro schools, schools within schools, different schooling hubs, if you will, where we really bring the best of community with personalization to empower people through many different pathways. And so in some ways, I'm actually more optimistic than I've ever been before, because I think parents are really voting with their feet. Educators, interestingly enough, are most of the entrepreneurs behind these innovative forms of schooling. And together, I wonder, will they create a bigger shift that's more student-centered in the long run? And more schools and more school systems will say, you know what?
Hi, I'm Sal Strazzeri. Welcome to our showroom in Woodbury, located on Jericho Turnpike in the Gabby's Bagel Shopping Center. Gymtech is the exclusive authorized Precord dealer for New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. We also carry many of the best brands of fitness equipment trusted by gyms. By working with Gymtech, you can bring the gym right into your home. We don't only sell equipment, we deliver, install, and set up your new equipment in your home. If anything should ever malfunction, Gymtech has a dedicated service department with factory-certified technicians to make sure your equipment is repaired quickly and properly. Gymtech also has locations in Southampton, New York City, New Jersey, and Greenwich, Connecticut. We look forward to meeting you and helping you with your fitness equipment needs.
This is for the architects of tomorrow. The ones who create to make a lasting impact. who are rewriting the world with tools that push what's possible. For those who build with responsible AI that's secure from the start. So you can build your way and go further, faster. Because whatever you dream of creating, the world is yours to build. Microsoft, yours to build.
We can do that too. I think there's been a generation of kids, frankly, continuing right now into the school systems that COVID just was devastating for. And I think a lot of students today are still extremely disengaged in school. We know enrollment in urban school districts has plummeted and continues to plummet. We know that chronic absenteeism remains incredibly high. And when you go into schools, a lot of places, they aren't very engaged. And I think this, rather than focus on the systems and the schools and the traditional structures, we need to be much more mindful of how each individual reconnects, re-engages, and something that's really motivating for them. And if that's sort of the entry-level principle, then hopefully we can start to rebuild. But gosh, there's just millions of kids. This is an enduring fact of the pandemic, that there's millions of people who didn't go to college, they didn't enter the workforce, and we don't really know what they're doing. How do we re-engage those individuals, I think, is a really tricky question for us right now. We're in a moment right now where baby boomers are leaving the workforce. They're starting to retire. And we know that employers consistently report they cannot find qualified people for large numbers of jobs. So we have this really weird moment in the economy that's more than a passing moment, which is that employers are keeping job openings open for long periods of time, really struggling to fill them. People are remaining stuck in work at the moment that they're not necessarily excited or passionate about, but they're nervous if they quit, and how will they change jobs and find something different. And then there's large numbers of people who are disengaged, not in the workforce at all. And frankly, they don't count in the unemployment rate because they're not actively looking for work. And so on one hand, you could say, well, okay, this is devastating to the individual communities, but I think it's devastating to the American economy writ large. And I just think if we can re-engage those people who are on the sidelines with short burst programs that are low risk, that allow them to earn while they learn, and get them re-engaged with their hands, with their minds, something, we could unlock a lot of growth in this country that we're completely discounting right now. What's always struck me about the education at a place like the Harvard Business School for MBA students is that, yes, you delve into the technical details, how to build and read and analyze, say, a financial model, but you never stop there. You're always asking a question in a case of, what would you do with this information if you were the CEO? What would you do as a manager confronted with this information? What's the question you really need to ask about this model? And so the way I think about it with AI is that our tools are going to change. But I think for students, having an underlying sense of the knowledge underpinning those answers that the models spit back at us is still going to be important, so we can interrogate them, see where we agree or disagree, see where we think there's judgment calls involved. The data is not going to tell me what to do because it's backward looking. It's what's my theory of what this data is starting to show me, and where's the world going that I need to be preparing for. And so being able to ask good questions and have great theories that allow you to act on the information you know ahead of time, I think is really going to be critical for leaders of businesses and society in the future.
The Department of Education handled about $229 billion of the $9.7 trillion that Congress allocated for federal agencies in 2024. That comes to about 2.4%. Despite the department's small size, it's taken on an outsized role in political rhetoric.
We will ultimately eliminate the federal Department of Education and send education back to Wisconsin and back to the states.
we're seeing sort of broader attacks on public education, and an extension of that is that we see attacks on the most visible symbol of public education, which is the U.S. Department of Education.
Where someone lands on this issue may come down to whether they believe regulation from the federal government is onerous on state governments, or if federal regulation serves as oversight that provides